Hi guys, this is Tag, and today I want to show you some of the common issues of the Rampage Extreme and how to diagnose and fix them. First off, I'm just going to do some basic stuff you can do with the heatsink still on. One thing is to check on all major power rails if you have any shorts directly. So on the 12 volt EPS, just top and bottom pin, all fine. Of course, I know this board is fine, but that's not the point. Secondly, if you're like me and always forget the colors of the 24 pin, you can just plug in a cutoff header and check the 3.3 volt and 5 volt rails, and also the 12 volt of the 24 pin, because that's not actually connected to the other one. Everything fine. Then the most common issue actually with these boards are the Fujitsu protolizer caps on memory, CPU and Northbridge. The memory one you can actually test without removing this little heatsink here by just poking up underneath here this choke or the other side. If everything is fine, resistance should be somewhere between 150 and 300 ohms. So as you could see, everything is fine here. Secondly, you have the one on the back, the one for the CPU. This one is not actually that critical. I've seen boards run with them still working. I've seen boards work with them shorted, but it's still not good to have. So just take 2 pins on one of your capacitors for VCore. Also check if it goes up and up. It's fine. If it's around, I would say under 10 ohms, it's definitely time to remove this one. You can just remove this one actually. For the other ones I'm going to show you how to replace them and with which kind of caps I usually replace them. Okay, now for the Northbridge one, we can also measure on the back. On the top of one of these small MLCCs, and come on, Northbridge resistance is very dependent on the board. So some boards I've seen as low as 6 ohms actually without the Fujitsu. So as you can see, this one is about 17 ohms. I would say if it's 5 or 4 ohms or below, this one is bad. Now, let's flip this little thing around. So, one other issue that is pretty common with these boards is that the south bridge just randomly dies. One way of diagnosing it is to check if it gets warm. You can't do this with the heatsink still on because it's underneath there. But in many cases, the data pins on the USB ports short when the south bridge dies. So you just take your multimeter again and measure the inner 2 pins of any of these USB ports. It should be, come on, about 2 mega ohms. If I could hit that properly. There we go. If it is single digits, it's definitely bad. So single digit ohms, not mega ohms, of course. So now, let's wait. One more issue that I've experienced on 2 boards so far is the power buttons light up, but they don't react to anything. So you can press power button or short the pins and the board won't even pretend to turn on. In this case, usually what I've experienced it to be is that 3v3 VSB is not present, which is made by this little step down here and can be measured on this choke here. And first check if that is shorted to ground, which is obviously not the case on this board. If it is, well, you're in for hell of a time. It could be Southbridge, it could be either of those two LAN chips here, which is also the reason why I tend to remove both of those. Silicon image chip, Firewire, and there's one more chip underneath here, I forgot what it was, but those are all non-essential basically. And some other people I've seen also do this, so it seems to be common practice to basically remove anything that could be wrong before you start to replace the Southbridge. Anyways, so now I'm just going to remove this heatsink. For you it's gonna be instant. I'm just going to undo it and we'll be back after that. Okay, so heatsink is gone now. As you can see, this board I already repasted, which is also one of the first things you should do if you get a new one, just on the side. Now, what am I doing? If you find one of your Fujitsus to be bad, that doesn't necessarily mean the board doesn't post or boot or even clock, but it will clock worse or have strange behavior. So even if your board still works and you just have some weird problems that you can't quite figure out, always check these three. If you find any of them to be bad, I'm now gonna show you how to remove them. Not on this board, give me a sec. So, now we have our quite beat up dummy donor board here, which still has one Fujitsu, which is perfectly fine to demonstrate on. So, ideally, you would want to have a hot air station and a soldering iron to remove them quickly and efficiently. But I know many people don't have it, so I'm going to try to get it done using a heat gun you regularly use to heat up your pot and a soldering iron. Let's get this thing plugged in. So now, before we switch on the heat gun, I'm going to put a little bit of solder onto the Fujitsu, like this on the side. And there is a reason I'm going to demonstrate this on the Northbridge one. Because with the Northbridge one you have to be rather careful not to heat up the Northbridge too much. So I use just a piece of copper from Intel stock cooler on top of the Northbridge so you don't kill it. Put that there. Now, usually I would put some Kapton tape on there around the CPU up here and the I/O on this side and also the PCIe slots. But since I'm pretty short on Kapton tape and this is a donor board, I'm not gonna do that, but please do as I say, not as I do in this case. Now, set your heat gun to not full blast, because then you might popcorn the board. Switch it on. Heat up the Fujitsu, pointing the heat gun away from the Northbridge as much as possible. I hope you see this. And simultaneously heat up the casing on the Fujitsu with your soldering iron. Now this is gonna take some time. You can wiggle it a bit. And it's moved. There we go. Away it is. Now let's check if I fucked up anything else. It looks like I did. That's why I usually use hot air station, because it has much more concentrated heat and you don't remove tiny little transistors like these two, which which we're going to just quickly put back. I mean, I wouldn't have to put them back, but to show you guys what you can do in case you fucked up the little things. Come on, turn around. There we go. There we are, back there. Now, got rid of this little fucker, which, as you can see, I have a whole handful of those, and that's just from last week, because they always die. If you want to like prepare for prepare yourself a proper board that is not gonna die, I would recommend, if you have the equipment to do it properly, to remove all 3 of them immediately. So now for what I use to replace them. On the Northbridge one, if you're not gonna use the stock heatsink, it's fine to just take 1, 2 aluminum polymer caps. Those are 470 microfarads, so 2 of them 900 something. Should be plenty to replace the 1000 microfarad Fujitsu. So let's just put those on there. Just cut them off. Nice and short. Also nice and short. Now, on these pads here, the outer ones are Northbridge voltage, the inner ones are ground. So you want to take your legs here, put some solder on the pads, and maybe some legs of the capacitor. Inside is ground, we said, so this way around. Put them on there. Go. 1. And 2. Now my soldering job is not the best in the world. As long as you don't short it, you're fine. Now this is one way of doing it. In many cases you want to use the original Northbridge cooler. So what I tend to do in those cases is to take some 470 microfarad SMD caps. No, those are kind of the wrong ones, those are 10 ohms, but I usually use 470 aluminum polymers as well, so like this one. Actually, ideally you don't use used ones, but you can, and it works. So let's remove this here. And this here. Now you want to wick those pads before you put the other ones on. So they are nice and straight. Well, they're going to be at an angle, but not standing off the PCB or anything. There's the wick. Let's wick those pads. Almost done. go. Now, on these ones, the little white line is not the negative side, it's the positive side. So I keep forgetting that. So hopefully I don't do again. Now you put them on here at an angle like this, facing outwards, or some way around, that doesn't really matter. And solder them all. That from the other side as well. Nice and clean. There we go. Second one. Nah, that's a bit too steep, this angle. Let's put it like this. And both sides again. Now, if they are crooked, it doesn't really matter. Just keep in mind that they shouldn't poke off the PCB too far, because then they might interfere with the heatsink on here. So now, next thing, the one on the back, you can just grill that thing with a heat gun and remove it. That is, you don't even need to put any Kapton tape, or you can also use aluminum foil if you don't have Kapton tape to insulate anything here. Just don't leave the CPU in the socket, maybe. Actually, might be better to leave it in there. I have to think about that. Memory one we don't have on here. I need another board. Want to demonstrate something? Let's get the memory one. Here is our original demonstration board now. I'm going to remove this memory heatsink quickly. There we go. Now on the memory one, regardless of how you remove it, you've got to be really careful not to hurt these slots. So you should insulate them with Kapton tape, or, as I said, aluminum foil if you don't have it. I'm kind of short on Kapton tape, as I already said, so I'm going to use, for demonstration purposes, just painter's tape. Put it around here, like this. Done. Now you would just do the same again. Soldering iron here. I'm not going to remove this one because it's perfectly fine. The board is pretty damn good. And on this one, I would really recommend using a hot air station like this. Well, just blowing hot air from the side, holding the soldering iron here and flipping it upwards. I don't have a board to demonstrate it right now because I removed all of the memory ones already from the boards where they were broken. So that's how I would do it. If you do it with the heat gun, also blast from this side and just hope your clips on the memory slots don't melt. I mean, it's not the end of the world if they do, but it doesn't look as nice. So let's remove this again. Now, where's our demo board? Here. The method with the aluminum polymers, it's the one I did so far. I'm going to experiment with some others, like adding 10, 1206, 100 microfarad MLCCs on here, or adding one LPO and 5 MLCCs, and various other combinations, maybe using some smaller MLCCs as well for better high frequency response. Also, I would probably put them on the back. All of those ones here, the slightly bigger ones, 0806 this should be, I think, just looking at it, are bypass caps for the North Bridge. So I would just try to parallel something on here. Haven't really tested it so far, but that is a plan for the future. Also, this one, honestly, I didn't notice any difference with it on there or off there, so just remove it, I guess. It's also really annoying if you have the back plate of the pot and it's like high point in the middle and just wobbling around and mounting pressure isn't even. Now, are there any other things? Well, South Bridge replacement I can't do myself. I just removed this one here because it's garbage board anyways. And it has the short on 3 VSB, as I talked about before. Let me quickly measure on this choke. Well, there is no choke left, but this side is VRM side, should be fine, exactly. And this side is 3 VSB. Now, as you can see, it's still shorted. Even though I removed everything that was on this rack. So in this board it's just a short in the PCB somewhere. It's complete garbage now, just donut board, unfortunately. Because it was actually clocking decently nice. I think it did almost 650 32M on LM2 once. So yeah, kind of sad. Now, are there any other things about Rampage Extremes I can quickly show? Yeah. Just put this on here. Now this is my benching board, and that's basically how I like to run those boards. I just removed the complete VRM heatsink, because unless you're running something like a QX 6700 or other quad cores that need huge amounts of voltage, you're probably not gonna need the heatsink on here. You can just either use the cut-up heatsink or use heatsinks from something like a P5Q, I think. P5Q fits on here. Northbridge, just use custom heatsink. Oh, that's the next point. If you have a board that really poorly clocks the FSB, something that is common with these things is that that's the wrong one. I need a demo board. That the thermal interface material between the Northbridge die itself and the heat spreader that X48 has goes bad over time, or because you ran it cold, or you put it in the dishwasher and it all came out, something like that. So I'm going to show you how to delete this thing. Just remove this so I don't get quite as dirty. Then you want something like this. I think this is a blade for some sort of carpet knife or something. You don't want the regular razor blades with the blade on both sides, because, well, obviously you might cut yourself easy there. Now, this is actually kind of a cheater board because the PCI slot is missing. I'm going to try to do it like I would on one that still has that. Just shove it underneath there from the edges. Be really careful not to put your fingers in front of it, obviously, because you might slip. Go in about 5 millimeters or so. This is actually might be already too much, but I've never cut the capacitors underneath there, so it's actually a pretty forgiving thing to delete. Just carefully do from all 4 sides. There you go. One more. Now this one has the caps in the way. Doesn't really matter. Just put it angle like this. Push upwards slowly. Go. Now go around all of the sides again, removing the last bit of the silicone. I hope you can see what I'm doing here, honestly. There we go. Ideally you want to put the CPU in the socket so you don't accidentally bend the pins with your thumb or other fingers. But again, this board is dead anyways. Just a one for you. Now, oh, I forgot one side. This side, just turn it around like this. Push it through there. Now just lift up a bit on the blade and it should come off. There we go. Perfect. Nothing was damaged, as you can see. Now we can just clean up our nerve bridge. This one actually, the interface material looks perfectly fine. But again, just the demo board, and this one actually ran pretty well until the end. Usually that is a trick I would do on boards that, for example, don't do 600 FSP at all stable on air. Obviously, after you have replaced the stock paste that ASUS uses on the heatsinks between nerve bridge and heatsink. Shit. Going to put this back together afterwards. So this is really just a last step. I would either... Okay, so my camera ran out of memory while I was talking about methods to put back the cooler on the nerve bridge after delaying it. Now, one way of doing it is if you only want to run the board on ambient, so, well, slightly sub-ambient might be fine, but nothing like single stage or LN2. I would plastic dip all those caps around here and do liquid metal between heat spreader and die. Now I actually have a board here that has the plastic dip. There we go. Now on this one it kind of rubbed off already, but just plastic dip the inner side, should be fine. Don't remove all of the silicone that comes stock, because it, in worst case, would keep in the liquid metal. Also, it prevents it from having too much mounting pressure on the die. Now, if you want to run the nerve bridge cold, obviously put KPX, Cryonaut, GC Extreme, or whatever your favorite LN2 paste is on there. And if you're scared of breaking the die, running it direct die, put the heat spreader between. It doesn't really make much difference because power consumption is pretty low. Obviously, I just run it direct die, but you don't necessarily have to. I'm not sure that there is much of a difference if you have proper paste anyways, because X48 is not that hot compared to its size, so power density is pretty low. Now, let's see, anything else? Yeah, obviously, shorted VRMs. Now, unfortunately, I have absolutely nothing to demonstrate it on, because all of my boards have VRMs that are fine or that I fixed already, which is unfortunate. But usually these VRMs short to the high side, so you're going to have 12 volts into your CPU. So if that happens, obviously RIP CPU. But also they're going to damage this chip here, on the schematic it's called MU1. It's just the left IROC chip. Unfortunately, this thing is actually pretty important for the board. All the ref voltages for PLL, VTT and stuff like that go through this one, so they don't run without it. So far, no one has managed to run it without. The chip doesn't seem to always die if the VRM dies, but most of the time. Now, the issue with these ones, and why so far it's pretty much a death sentence for the board, is that they have some sort of firmware on them, and you can't just take a board where, well, the same thing happened and take the second chip and put it in position of the left one. You actually have to either find a donor board or wait until someone finds a way to update the firmware on the chip, which might be in BIOS, but all of that is too much for me. I'm not that smart with BIOS modding and stuff. Anyways, that's one other thing that is rather common. Well, not really common, but that can happen to these boards. Now, obviously, the other thing is, like with every other motherboard, that the board just stops to work and everything seems fine. You measure the voltages, you swap BIOSes, you flash the BIOS, nothing works in that case. If it's not a super golden board, I would just give up after like 8 hours of probing around and finding nothing, and testing different stuff like higher mounting pressure in the socket. That's actually, if you have old Rampages that you have binned a lot of CPUs on, or just, I don't know, tightened the pot too much a couple times, the pins in the socket might lose their tension. So a good way to find out if that happened is to use a Core 2 Quad, or this is not a Core 2 Quad, this is a Pentium 4, or a Pentium D, because they have slightly thicker PCBs, so the mounting pressure is higher. Or you take a piece of copper plate, something like you would use for your volt mods. Let's see if I can find something here. Don't look too good. Nope, no copper plate for me. Anyways, just the copper sheet that you use on like e-power mod on GPU or something like that. Cut two thin strips, put the CPU in there. There we go. And just lay them on top of the, well, not on top, at the side groove of this IHS, and hold them in place and tighten down the socket so you have more mounting pressure. I've seen boards that seem to be completely dead, just 00 postcode, work perfectly fine like that. Obviously the board is not going to last another couple hundred CPUs of pinning after that, but you can still overclock it and it's going to perform fine. What else? Well, I think that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Obviously, I'm going to test a lot more stuff with caps and in general modding stuff on these boards until I finally get one that will somehow run 660 MHz FSB through SuperPi 32 amp. Until then, that's it. Thanks, guys. I hope I could help some of you fixing these legendary but fragile boards.